So we're no longer in a state of play with organisations now where things are static. Things have moved on so many times, and there are so many different risks and opportunities for organisations at this time. What do you think are some of the first things that you would do if you were assessing an organisation's governance?
I think one of the key things is to see how governance aligns with strategy
Yeah.
within an organization. So, governance has to complement what the business is doing. It can't be something that works against everything that the organization is trying to achieve, because then it becomes bureaucratic and people consider it to be a tick box exercise. So I think one of the first things you need to think about is, how does it fit with the strategic direction of an organization, and how does it support that effective decision making process?
Okay, so there are so many opportunities for organizations to improve what they're doing and to modernize the governance they're doing. And for those organizations that are at that point that they want to do it, how do you see that kind of playing out? Where are there kind of quick wins, easy wins on kind of modernizing? And also, where do you see the kind of common mistakes? I think they kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, so common mistakes I think are people treating it as a compliance exercise.
Hmm.
So not thinking about governance as a strategic enabler. And in that context, there are some key quick wins that I think people can really look at, and that's partly related to the communication
Yeah.
element of why good governance is important within an organisation. If you clearly articulate that for everybody within the business, they understand why they're being asked to do something, and also I can identify more easily the benefits for applying those governance best practices.
So there are so many different political, geopolitical risks at the moment, other challenges that organizations have to go through. And looking forward is obviously really important. So, what sorts of things do you think can be done to future proof a governance model? And what does that actually mean on a kind of operational level?
Future proofing your governance means ensuring that it has flexibility and that
Yeah.
it can evolve as your organization evolves. Governance isn't a rule book, it's not a set of rules that you have to follow rigidly. It's about thinking how you evolve and adapt your governance principles to support your organizational needs, and the best way to future proof your governance is to build in that flexibility. So when your business needs to change, when you want to operate with agility as an organization, your governance should flex with you to enable you to really focus in on, how do we ensure that we have the best governance practices to support our organization right now and take us forward for the future.
So, technology is a real driver at the moment. Everyone's talking about AI and how that might affect the workplace, but also how it currently affects the workplace and other technological developments. So, how do you feel over the last 5 years that technology has moved on in the governance space, and how do you think that enables people to achieve more?
We have to embrace changes in technology. Throughout my career, the changes in the way we operate from a governance perspective have been so significant, moving from paper filings and updating statutory registers by hand through to, having electronic statutory registers, using electronic board books. It's about seeing the technology as an enabler, about how it can streamline what we're doing so that we can really demonstrate that our key focus is around advisory. So, using those technology advancements to support you in delivering that best practice guidance and advice has to be the right way to approach it. And why not? Why shouldn't we use the technology that's available to us to be able to enhance how we do things, rather than see it as a hindrance or something that's going to take away our professions? There's always going to be a need for a human element to everything we do. That sort of nuances around understanding behaviours, understanding how people are working together.
Yeah.
That always exists, but why not take advantage of the technology that's at our fingertips to be able to support us in being able to demonstrate our expertise, and really thinking about highlighting for the organisations where we add value rather than just being a process driven function.
And do you think that the technology and kind of incorporating that into an organization, where do you think that kind of question should start? Should it be the board asking the governance person? Should the governance person be asking the questions? Where does the interest need to lie to make it successful as well? So who should be asking the question, and who needs to be valuing it
Yeah.
for it to actually work?
I think we need to demonstrate our strategic thought leadership when it comes to enhancing the governance within an organisation. So we have the ability to influence, we engage with the most senior people within the organisations. If we can demonstrate that expertise that might well shift the balance in terms of how we are operating, then that is a natural way to start that conversation. So rather than letting somebody come to you being more forthright in terms of demonstrating we understand the needs of the organisation and what we feel might create value within the organisation itself. At the end of the day, there's a cost attached to a lot of things that we do, but if we can demonstrate the value that that can create in the longer term, that enables us to show that there's a real benefit to an organisation for embracing something of this nature.
So in the world today, there is an awful lot of volatility, and boards really have to think about what that might mean for them, how that might impact their business. How do you think organizations can kind of start to approach that, and what sort of practical steps might they take to ensure that they are set up for the future, but also set up for the things that could set them off guard and change the situation in the near term?
Yeah, so I think it's important that organisations are clear on what their governance looks like. And in part, that's around undertaking a governance maturity assessment and how that adds strategic value to the organisation. There is so much focus around risk management, but translating that back to strategic developments, because we know organisations need to focus on delivering outcomes, and part of that is understanding the risks and controls that need to be implemented to support those decisions that they're taking. So I think if you're cognizant of your governance arrangements and how that supports you, you are better placed to be able to front into some of those aspects that are fundamental to impacting your ability to deliver those key outcomes. And so thinking about how you bring in the risks and align those to your strategic outcome.
With risk, obviously, it's a very broad subject. Lots of organizations have their own risk teams or risk departments, but risk also sits with the governance professionals, because arguably it also sits with the board, being the ultimate assessor and mitigator of those particular risks. What sorts of things would you say that people should start to be thinking about, given the volatility that we have in the world today? How does that play into the risk register? How often should it be updated? What sorts of things would you expect to see on it? What sorts of things might be on it now that wouldn't have been on it maybe a number of months or even years ago?
I think in terms of looking at risk, being clear on what the impact of those risks are to your organisation. I've heard in many occasions people saying that they only look at their risk register once a year. The risk register needs to be a live document. It needs to support you deliver those key outcomes on a continuing basis, because we know risks change and they change quite rapidly. So the geopolitical landscape that we have at the moment is changing so significantly. Not reflecting on how that impacts your business model on a continuing basis means that you can be unprepared when something does happen. And we know that organisations need to really focus on the impact of risk. Everybody has to take risks. It's a way that organisations grow. It's a way that organisations can deliver those key outcomes. But it's about thinking through what controls might be needed to mitigate those risks, to ensure that they support the organisational growth rather than hinder the ability for an organisation to grow. Some of the things that I think organisations should be thinking about at the moment are things like, how does your information security structure within your business support you deliver those key strategic outcomes? we know very much so at the moment with the recent press, with the recent cyber attacks on key organisations like Marks and Spencers and the Co-op, the ability for an organisation to be responsive, to be able to manage that effectively is so critical, because a lot of the challenges that organisations face are linked to their reputation. And whilst reputational risk may well not be the most that may not be the greatest financial impact to an organisation, it can have one of the most significant impacts to an organisation, because when a business loses face with its customers, that's when that really kicks in, that ability to be able to demonstrate you've got the right processes and procedures. Thinking about your governance maturity, what does it look like? How does that support you manage risks within your organisation? And I think from a board perspective, not considering risk in isolation. So risks should form part of every single business decision that is being taken. It's not a standalone report, it's reflected in everything that you're doing. So there is a close alignment between what you're doing from a strategic perspective and how you're managing the risks in delivering those strategic outcomes.
Recently, Beyond Governance decided to become ISO accredited. That process was a process that you led us through. What do you think you learnt as part of that process on risk and governance? Because obviously this is a different framework to what we as governance professionals are used to be working within. What did you learn? And I suppose, why was it a benefit? And what might others be able to kind of learn from what you have since found out?
So, going through that ISO accreditation process was a bit of an eye opener for me, because what it highlighted was the need to recognise all the elements of risk that impact an organisation and think about pragmatic solutions to what you need as a business. So, and I think it goes back to what we've always talked about from a governance perspective, is that governance isn't one size fits all. It's reflective of the organisation, and it has to be proportionate to what you're doing as a business. And so for me, going through that accreditation process enabled me to really think about how we better manage risk within our organisation, how we identify those risks, what we do to mitigate those risks, and how we can be really clear on the impact. Because again, I think that impact assessment of how, in this circumstance, information security risks affect your organisation means that you can be better prepared. So you understand, what is it that I might need to do to remain agile as an organisation, to be able to implement a plan, think about your business continuity. How do you adjust what you're trying to do so that you can continue to deliver those outcomes, so you can continue to deliver for your clients? And I think that structure aligns nicely with your governance your governance framework, understanding how you feed those risks into your framework to ensure that you're sighted on the impact and the assessment of the impact on what you might need to do from a delivery perspective. You must be delighted that Beyond Governance has been recognised by the Sunday Times as one of the best places to work. Culture as a competitive advantage is really important for an organisation. So why was this so important for you to have this recognition?
I think it's very easy to say that you're doing something. It's a different thing altogether to actually be able to prove it and show it to someone externally. I want us as Beyond Governance to hold ourselves accountable, as we would expect of our clients, to breed that culture and breed that inclusivity, which is one of the things that we were told we'd done particularly well at. We won in the subcategory of best place to work for ethnic minorities, which speaks to the fact that we are an inclusive environment. And I think that that's super important, because bringing the diversity of thought and that kind of creativity really helps drive an organisation forward. To be able to pull on all the different strings of different people's backgrounds is really, really important. And that comes back, I think, to cognitive diversity as opposed to any other type of diversity. And we try to kind of bring that into the organization. I think part of the success of Beyond Governance in that area is the fact that I was previously a company secretary, and culture is an intrinsic part of being able to do that particular role. So I brought that knowledge to Beyond Governance. And obviously we've now been recognised for that. So you're a qualified coach. That means that you're obviously in a position where you can talk to governance as a governance professional, company secretary, but also focus in on the coaching aspect. And that kind of leads to executive coaching. So not just governance professionals, but boards as well, correct? What do you think that a true professional coach brings that you don't get from someone that doesn't have that level of qualification?
So, coaching is about helping people unlock something for themselves,
Yep.
rather than giving them an answer. When I was doing my qualification, one of the things that I looked at quite a lot with respect to what does it mean to be a coach versus what does it mean to be a consultant.
Yep.
Working within a consultancy business, our aim and objective is to deliver for our clients advice and guidance. They are engaging us to give them solutions, to be able to provide some direction for them, which is quite different from a coaching perspective, because as a coach, what I'm looking to do is support somebody understand their own direction of travel, what their own perspective is with respect to something that they're thinking about.
So it's self-guided.
It's self-guided. So I'm not giving I'm not giving someone an answer or a solution. And that's also where there is a bit of a distinction between coaching and mentoring as well, because mentoring is more often than not somebody looking to understand somebody else's level of expertise. How did you approach this? How did you succeed within your career? How did you make that next step or that transition? Whereas from a coaching perspective, it's very much a supporting role. I'm not giving anybody an answer. I'm not giving anybody that solution. And there is a fine balance. It's quite tricky to not step over that line. It's quite difficult to sometimes take that step back and go, I'm here to support them reach their own conclusions. Because again, when you go through that coaching process, by working through and identifying the solution yourself, you have a clearer understanding of what's stopping you being able to do something. And that's quite a useful distinction. The one thing that I see with respect to coaching is that intrinsic link towards supporting boards, enhancing their own effectiveness. Within that sort of board effectiveness space, there is so many elements that are behavioural in nature.
Yes.
When we look at governance, we look at the processes and the practices, and you can have a myriad of different policies, a really well-defined framework that you operate. But when you link that back to effectiveness, you're then looking at how people are behaving. You're looking at the relationships between people. You're looking at how they work together. And that's where the coaching element, I think, comes into play quite importantly. You're listening. You're listening to understand what they're actually telling you and how that's impacting how they're behaving within that space.
So I suppose it's almost listening back to what they're saying to you and then you relaying back to them what they've actually already said.
Absolutely.
So they get to hear
absolutely
what they're actually thinking and saying.
thinking.
Yeah.
And that's one of the key elements. So it's that ability to listen to what people are telling you, not what people are saying. And there is that real nuance around understanding behaviours in terms of bringing out that detail from them that helps them identify the solution.
Who do you think are kind of the people that are in the right sort of mindset to really benefit from coaching? Because when it's kind of unpacking some of your own kind of foibles or things that you want to improve on, both positive, negative, enhancing things, pulling back on other things, you obviously need to have an open mind to these sorts of, to be able to want to change as a person. But what do you see as a coach as being some really key things. If somebody was thinking about doing some coaching or having some coaching, then what would you say were some of the basics that they need to kind of start thinking about before they even embark on that journey to see if they are the right sort of person, they're in their right mindset?
So coaching works really well where you have to identify a solution.
Right.
So
Okay.
you are on a path, but that path might not be where you want to go directionally. So using coaching to unlock what outcome you want to achieve is quite important. You have to be open because it's quite soul searching when you go down that coaching route. It can unlock emotions within people that they're not used to having to front into.
Yes.
Because again, coaching is so intrinsically linked to behaviors and an individual's behavior that if you're not open to potentially hearing more of a negative side to you, and bearing in mind it's you driving the outcomes of that coaching, that you won't necessarily get the value from it that you want to get. So it's about being open to understand that there are different solutions. There are opportunities that may well have been new to you that you may well not have thought about as you go down that process. I think if you go in with a specific closed mindset that you don't think you're going to get any value from it, you might as well not do the whole coaching process. It has to be about enhancing your capabilities, but about you wanting to enhance your own capabilities. It's very self-driven. So it's very self-driven. It's about you. Coaching is always about the individual who's being coached. And as a coach, we're there facilitating that growth, that change, that sort of realization of something within that individual.
When someone's looking for a coach, what sorts of things should they be looking for, either in that person as a trait, because obviously they're going to have to be potentially vulnerable with that person, but also as a qualification or as a skill set, because coaching, as far as I understand it, doesn't have set parameters of kind of professional expectations. So you could class yourself as a coach having done a very short course, or you could class yourself as being a coach, as you have done, doing a much longer course that includes assessments with psychologists, etc., to be able to truly make sure that you are at the right level to be able to do what you want to do.
People have to come to coaching with a level of vulnerability.
Mm.
And as a coach, you have to be able to hold the line in terms of what your role is versus what they are actually doing being coached.
Right.
So for me, being able to support but maintaining those boundaries is quite important. It's not my story when I'm coaching someone. It's I'm not part of their story. It's their own story, and it's how I'm supporting them identify the solution. So when you are about to embark on that coaching program, one of the most important elements is the chemistry that you have with your coach. And part of the coaching engagement right from the outset is having an opportunity to meet somebody to see whether that chemistry exists. We're all individual people. We have good days and bad days. Knowing that the person you are going to be taking this journey with is somebody who you have the right fit, that right chemistry is so critical. And that it's okay to say that that's not the right person. There's nothing personal about that decision. It's about knowing that you feel comfortable, because as you say, there is so much vulnerability being brought into that coaching journey with someone, that they have to feel comfortable bearing their soul with you. You know, they could be highlighting some of the things that are demonstrate they're at their lowest ebb. So that ability to be able to meet somebody that you feel comfortable will recognize your vulnerabilities, support you with your journey is really important. we have to get on with the right person. So that fit, that chemistry meeting is the most important first step within a coaching journey.
And qualification wise, what sorts of things should people be looking for? Because it may not be something they've ever thought about. They just go, I want to coach. Okay, just type it into search engine, and then they come up with somebody. How do you know if you're picking someone that legitimately knows how to do this, or somebody that maybe has less experience or less skill?
So identifying someone who has gone through that journey of understanding what it means to be a coach is really important. So having that qualification, having the skill and expertise. Coaching is such a personal journey that your coach needs to be able to manage that effectively, and that's really important from a protection perspective. When we go through coaching, we often bring in personal elements to it, and it's really difficult to distinguish between what's going on within your personal circumstances versus your work circumstances. So if you're providing some executive coaching to someone, you're looking at helping them support, grow, and develop within their role. But a lot of that might well be linked to some of the things that have gone on within their personal lives, whether it's something that they experience that's holding them back, whether it's something that is it has a particular vulnerability to it. Unless as your coach understands what to look for to be able to support you and also protect you, that could create some relationships that don't work particularly effectively. And I think having identified a coach who has been through that professional qualification route, who understands the boundaries that you need to set, is really important, because you're not in a position to be able to support someone with some quite significant sort of mental health challenges, for example. It's about knowing what you're looking to deliver for that person and what they are looking to try and achieve through that outcome.
And what sort of accrediting bodies are there out there for coaches that are well recognised, and the in-depth sort of coaching qualification that someone might kind of take up?
So the International Coaching Federation is one of the fundamental bodies that people are accredited with. You have to do many hours to be able to get your accreditation with the body, to be able to demonstrate your effectiveness as a coach. By going down that route, you're demonstrating a level of expertise that you have gained through both qualification and practical application of your coaching capabilities. There are others. The Association for Coaching is another one. There is a European association as well that you can be accredited with, and I think so one of the key things is that accreditation. It's understanding that who you are engaging with has the right expertise to be able to do it. People talk about coaching a lot, but there is a real distinction between what a qualified professional coach does versus what somebody who thinks they are coaching someone does. Because again, it goes back to what's your role and remit within that relationship, and knowing the boundaries of your remit. And I think that's where sometimes there is a blurring of the lines between what people think about from a mentoring versus a coaching perspective. And mentoring is very much more around helping somebody, giving them, a perspective, whereas coaching is supporting somebody to identify their own solution, their own kind of perspective on a scenario that they want to see a change.
And I presume that those bodies that you've spoken about have a code of conduct that the coaches will need to comply with as well, which means just implicitly that those people are going to be able to comply.
Absolutely.
And are expected to comply with those particular standards. The same as governance professionals, we're expected to comply with the CGI code of conduct in the way that we deal with things with integrity, etc. That's the same, right, for
It is,
coaches of these
absolutely.
particular
Yeah,
bodies?
you have to work within the code of conduct. As a coach, you have to go through a program of coaching yourself. So you have to go through that program where your coaching ability is assessed by your peers, because it's about demonstrating that level of expertise and really thinking about the value that the accreditation gives to somebody who's going on that journey. They know that when they engage somebody who is an accredited coach, that they are actually going to be dealing with somebody who is trained in being able to support somebody on that journey.
And the difference is, I guess, between going on a course that might be an online course, you just sit there and you just listen like a lecture, compared to the type of course that you've done. What are the distinct differences, and what do you think that that gives you that you can't just sit in front of a screen for a couple of days and get a certificate through the post? How are they different?
So it's practical expertise.
Right.
So when I did my qualification, I did it in person, with a cohort of other people who were also doing their qualification. What we did through that was the practical application of coaching.
Right.
So we were actually coaching each other, and we would be the coach or we would be the coachee. So we were supporting each other by actually demonstrating our own expertise and having that assessed, so that we were able to deliver appropriate coaching.
Right. Yeah.
We were able to follow the sort of process correctly to be a coach, to ask those open questions, to be able to support someone, not guide someone, not provide a solution to someone.
And I suppose that kind of comes in as well, that with a very short course that's very lecture based, it can only really be in this situation you ask these questions, in that situation you ask these questions, and there are no nuances there, because you can't explain to someone without the practical application about what it's really like to have a real person in front of you that doesn't fit within certain kind of parameters.
And how you adjust the way you coach within those circumstances. It's a really personal journey, and people have to demonstrate their vulnerabilities. I remember going through that process, and somebody I was doing some practical coaching with, they started to cry because they were unlocking things that were so fundamentally in tune with what they were looking to try and identify as a solution, that it becomes very emotional. And it's really difficult if you are unable to then know how to manage that scenario. And that for me was quite an important learning, because in that scenario I was like, oh, I've made this person cry, I shouldn't be making them cry. But actually that was their journey to go on.
And it can also be quite cathartic as well for them to be able to unlock some of these things, as long as they feel it's a safe space with that person.
That safe space is really important, and that's where that sort of chemistry comes back to it, understanding that the person you're with is a person you feel secure with, somebody that you feel comfortable saying, this happened and this has led me to behave in this particular way. Why has it done that? And what do you want to change as a result of it?
And who do you think that coaching is best for? I know you've done executive coaching, which obviously does touch on governance professionals as well, because they obviously work in an executive capacity. But who do you think is the best sort of person to experience that kind of coaching journey?
So I think coaching can work for anybody, to be honest, at any level within an organisation. It's about their willingness to open up and think about being solutions focused around what they want to change. It's very common for senior leaders to go through that process, because it's a valuable tool for them in unlocking direction of travel, how they want to position themselves for the next step to be able to demonstrate a level of expertise. It's really useful for board directors. It's useful for governance professionals. It's useful for C-suite executives, because it's about your own development, because it's linked back to your own personal development, and because when somebody goes into that coaching journey, they are in control of their journey and what they want to unlock. It's about supporting them on that journey and helping them identify where the focus of attention can be, what the blocker is, what's stopping them from doing something, how they are then going to tackle that. And just by asking these questions now that I've just articulated, it's that demonstration of what are you going to do? How are you going to change this? Where do you want this to take you? They're all driving an individual to be able to grow and develop themselves rather than providing them with a solution to be able to grow and develop.
So I suppose coaching is something that you take on a personal level, but something that you have to take with you outside of that coaching
Yes.
kind of situation, outside that room, talking to your coach and actually put it into practice.
Absolutely. Yeah, because then you're looking at what's going to make a difference for you. Because coaching is about you as an individual. So your coach is just that person who's helping you. You drive it forward. So you take it forward in the way that works best for you. And so it could be between sessions, you've got, quasi homework. How are you going to approach this? What are you going to do? And then the next session will be following up on, so how did that work? Where did that take you? How did that make you feel? Then continue that journey for someone on that, pathway to identify what they're looking to achieve.